Hello, and welcome to our 7th episode of Bot Boundaries, where we explore what it means to be human in the age of AI. My name is Katie Wilson. I'm here with Jackie Gutierrez, and today we're going to dive into the ever-changing world of search and how AI is fundamentally changing user behavior and the results we see. We'll explore how brands can stay on top of their visibility in a world where SEO is evolving to AEO and GEO. And don't worry, we'll define those for you. And this is going to be an episode with a lot of explanation and a lot of definitions. So we'll keep you abreast of all the changes and what we see in terms of best practices.
Awesome. Yeah. Hello, everyone. This topic is a great one as we think about the evolution of AI and search. I know it's been a hot topic with marketers and in the media, and every business should understand how things are moving and shifting. Katie, go ahead and kick it off for us.
Yes. Well, first up, I think it's really important that we define some of the terms we're going to be discussing today, because even I, as I was prepping, was like, wait, what is this versus this? So search engine optimization, which many of you know is SEO, that is really how traditionally Google and other search engines were pulling and showing your information on their results page. So that one seems pretty straightforward to a lot of folks. We get into AEO, that is answer engine optimization. So now we're getting into ChatGPT, things where you're asking a question, non-traditional search, and seeing how that information shows up. We'll talk about how that works. And then generative engine optimization is GEO. So that is also talking about now how do we generate and go back and forth where things are building upon that idea, showing you bullet points, showing me more robust, not just an overview, but something where you're going back and forth and generating ideas, something like ChatGPT or Claude. We'll talk about the differences between that and how that pulls information. So I think that's a good baseline when we talk about it. SEO obviously still very foundational for ranking lists and driving traffic. AEO is really about optimizing content to be selected as a direct answer. So this is where we're talking about like AI rich or snippets formula. You are the answer to a question. I think that one's a really important distinction. GEO, generative, is more, we're targeting visibility within that AI responses, and it's more of a conversational back and forth. So that really helped me wrap my brain around like all these different sources. But I think like a really good point to remember, and we'll get into it later, is there are some changes and ways to optimize, but it is not a full overhaul. A lot of like the AEO and GEO best practices are SEO best practices.
For sure.
So we'll talk about that. So I don't want people to feel intimidated that they can't master this or feel like it's something they can do for their business.
Yeah, we don't need to freak out yet.
No, not at all. All right. So first up, there's a really great article we'll link to from The Guardian. And I really think it speaks to the base fear a lot of brands and businesses I talk to and I see online have. So it asked if the rise of AI search summaries and chatbots means the end of the traffic era. And, this is talking about web traffic where you get traffic from search and people click over to your site. Sites will still get traffic from AEO and GEO, but are we embarking on a different user experience and optimization strategy that many were used to? This traditional search of like, I search for something, I find it, I click through. Now with AEO and GEO, you might be on that platform going back and forth without clicking through to the website.
Right.
And a lot of people fear this, right? It discusses this change. Many media sites are actually predicting a decline in traditional web traffic. It found that media executives around the world fear search engine referrals will fall by 43% over the next 3 years, as predicted. Therefore, we're seeing journalists function more as content creators, hosting their content on TikTok and YouTube and video and audio formats. We're doing the same, right, with this podcast. For news sites, Google search is down 33% globally, referring to news sites, right? So we're now seeing more than 2,500 news sites sourced by Chartbeat in that report. So that was an interesting look at that. The figure is actually even higher in the US than other countries in terms of search leading to referrals of news sites. So this has led to Italian news publications demanding an investigation into Google's AI overviews, calling it a traffic killer. So I think that's the more extreme example when we think about news. And I would say it's not a traffic killer. It's an evolution of where this content lives, right? Traditionally, you'd go on the news site, you'd look at Google News, click through to the article, article and read it on the news site. Now you might get an AI summary of that article or that topic, but you might, if you want to read more, you will click through and read the whole article. But I do think there is this rise in content that is audio and and that is just a change in how people consume information. And I think the smart brands and news outlets, they're already doing this, right? They already have top podcasts. They already have audio formats and video formats on YouTube. So it really is an evolution versus a total traffic killer as like the more extreme things. But it will be interesting to see going forward how information's consumed, how much people actually click through to the end source.
Yeah, I mean, very good points in that, the traffic is evolving, right? And so it's just coming from different sources. And for marketers, we're talking about business owners. We've been speaking to business owners, essentially kind of educating you on AEO and GEO. But as far as marketers who might already be educated on this, what this really affects for us is attribution and how we
Yes.
prove performance for our clients. And that is shifting. And so this is a topic that you need to start talking to your clients about, and how attribution is shifting. So that's really important. We're going to talk a little bit more about that as we continue this conversation. So what can brands do about this change to traffic? How is Reddit feeding into AEO? A recent Search Engine Land article proclaimed that good GEO is good SEO, right? The good core principles of clear, authoritative, user-focused content will determine visibility, just like SEO and good website content, whether the answer appears in as a ranked list or as an AI-generated response. You're using very similar tactics to rank in this new area, which is an AI generated response, but very similar tactics, although there are new tactics that we'll discuss more. Their top tips were write for people, not algorithms, publish content that only you can produce, right? We're always talking about being original, being creative in this age of AI. And what we're all also talking about is to just avoid sameness. Sameness is a killer right now. And keep your website fast, stable, and user-friendly. We're also seeing a major decoupling of clicks versus impressions. And this goes back to what I was just mentioning as marketers, how we prove attribution of our efforts is being affected. And so I'm really seeing it on Google Ads of this decoupling of clicks and impressions in my agency. Impressions are rising as they are getting content scooped up by AI, but clicks are declining on those traditional channels that you could attribute performance to. It's not necessarily a bad thing as people are getting basic answers and qualifications before they click onto your site, which could be leading to better informed and targeted and traffic in some cases. So again, marketers, you got to look at your attribution, start to talk to this about this differently to your clients, and business owners be aware the attribution of where you're spending your money on what strategies and tactics online are most effective. So this is a conversation that everyone needs to be talking about in regards to attribution.
This was a big aha moment for me when I saw that decoupling of clicks versus impressions. That was a huge takeaway of like, yes, that's what people are afraid
That's what's happening.
of like, hey, my impressions are, well, usually it's my clicks are down. My clicks are down. No one's coming to my website. But it's like, but look at your impressions. Look at the traffic we're now gaining from ChatGPT. That's now 5 to 10% of your total traffic. How are you optimizing to that? So it's just like, I would say, don't freak out about the changes or a decrease in clicks, but ask that secondary of question of like, now what? Where is traffic going? How do we optimize? And it's not a bad thing to get better qualified traffic. And it's not a bad thing to get picked up by AI overviews.
It's a good thing.
Yeah, your brand is still getting out there. It's just going to be a different way to measure it. And that was like a big one for me. So we think about how can brands adapt to this? That's the biggest question, we get working with different companies. What changes do we need to make to reporting and maybe the overall marketing funnel? A couple of suggestions that came from the Search Engine Land article. Also, they took a lot of insights from a recent Danny Sullivan talk, and he's a great expert in SEO. So I really loved his take on a lot of this. So prioritizing visibility first SEO. We were talking about impressions. We're talking about visibility, right? How do we appear in those AI overviews? How do we be the answer to the question that people are asking? Those placements might not generate clicks, but you're still getting brand awareness. It's authority signaling that you're the authority. And that influence matters as much as direct traffic. So it is a mindset shift there in terms of visibility and what that means in AI overviews. And now we need to account for this impression-based influence. If your content consistently appears in AI generated summaries, are those answers high quality, right? Are you building brand recognition, establishing a topical authority? That value isn't really captured by Google Analytics, right? I can see if ChatGPT was a source, if people clicked through and then went to my site. But how do I know what kinds of queries I'm showing in, how I was ranked in those answers? That's still TBD right now, right? In terms of like reporting back on AI summaries. We'll get into it later. There's startups and others that are like making a lot of claims in terms of optimization and visibility and how they can report back on this, but it's still very early days. So you might not have all the answers you want, and that's okay. I think that's a really big point when it comes to this idea of impressions from AI overviews. So implement advanced or evolved attribution modeling. This is huge. And it will not be the silver bullet because there's not a perfect solution yet, but we need to understand that content that introduces prospects to your brand through AI overviews might not get the credit for a conversion that happened days later or through a direct visit or a branded search. So we really need to understand the concept of multi-touch attribution and incrementality testing to help measure this indirect impact. This was something huge that I was working on my entire time at Google, was really getting people to adopt multi-touch attribution, getting them to widen their windows of conversions, getting them to analyze that and realizing it is not perfect, but it will give you a better insight of, hey, ChatGPT drove this direct traffic, but when I look at the multi-touch pathways, it might look like a ChatGPT question or query that I showed up in. Then that led to a direct Google search. Then it led to a click. Then it led to 3 more research clicks. Then it led to a conversion. Or in between there might be an ad click, right? But we need to understand that we are no longer giving credit to the last click or the last channel. We need to look at the full scope to understand what influence these AI overviews and generative AI platforms have on the end result. And it's not essentially clear. And even in Google Analytics, it's not super clear yet. But I can guarantee they're building towards it. And a lot of the people want to show how this is influencing spending behavior and click behavior.
Yes,
so
we need that information now.
Yeah, it's not there yet, but it's just getting and testing multi-touch attribution will be like my number one suggestion for everybody, just to get comfortable with it and move away from last click, please. And okay, monitoring your share of voice in AI search. This is actually very, very easy to track right now. You can see what direct traffic is coming from ChatGPT, Perplexity, Claude. They will list as a referral site in Google Analytics or whatever platform you're using. But again, that's if they're searching, they go into that AI platform and then they direct click to your website. So you can see that and you can see what percent that might be growing over time. And it is definitely something you should be monitoring. Now, it's not going to be as big as Google and it's not intended to be yet, but it's growing and you should see what platforms are driving it and do sample searches yourself to see how you're showing up.
Those are all really, really good tips, especially when you talked about how just attribution, all the touch points, it's more like a network now. It's not this distinct funnel anymore. And really, really great points there.
Yeah, and I think we just need to get comfortable being uncomfortable when it comes to attribution in this new era, and not everything's going to be tied up in a bow for us right away. And that brings us to e-commerce brands. So Jackie and I both have a background in e-commerce and retail, and so this is a really important one because there's a little bit more nuance and difference when you're dealing with a retail brand and how you appear in AI overviews. So wanted to make sure to talk about that directly because this is a big shift for online shopping and customers, right? In the future, will customers not be browsing your site as much? Will they be asking AI assistants to find and buy products for them? That means your store needs to be ready for purchases happening through the LLMs, large language models like ChatGPT or Gemini, where a new checkout feature allows US users to make purchases through conversations with the AI on Google search. So I believe they touted this at NRF recently. It's a big thing that's happening where you will be able to purchase through an AI or Gemini search. You will be able to purchase, I'm sure, in the future through ChatGPT and never leave that site. And that might be a flow that people are uncomfortable with, but I think it's a flow that people need to get familiar with and understand how it could benefit their brand. So a few very practical steps I'll share. And just to be clear, these aren't anything new. These are also best practices. A lot of them, when I read this, was like, oh, duh, that's a best practice for Google Shopping. That's a best practice for feed optimization, which many retailers are already doing. So it shouldn't be a totally new way of thinking, but it might be something you haven't thought about in a while or haven't cleaned up. So I do think it's important to think about this. So get listed where it matters, really sign up for the programs like ChatGPT's Merchant Program, Google's Gemini, Google Shopping. So your feeds and products are accessible through AI shopping flows. So that's the bare minimum. A lot of people are submitting to Google Shopping already. You might have an Amazon, a feed at Amazon. But really think about, ChatGPT Merchant was a new one for me where I'm making sure folks are opted into that, and make sure you're opted into the new features on Google Ads and Google Gemini so that you can be included. Optimize product pages. This is huge. AI agents rely heavily on structured and detailed information. You need to make sure the product names, descriptions, specs, and attributes are clear, accurate, and keyword rich. An example I always used at Google when working with retailers was, you can't just say this is the Victoria dress. No one knows what that means. You have to say it's a black A-line dress off the shoulder. Now, that doesn't have to be in the title. It can still be called the Victoria dress, but you need to include that insight of what it looks like in the descriptor in order for Google and also now these AI overviews to pick up what that is. And I often think about it as like, if someone was sight impaired and you were explaining to someone who's blind or sight impaired what that dress looks like, how would you describe it, right? You have to have that description in there. It's super important.
And a best practice even before AI.
Yes,
right?
even before AI. Yeah. So keep it up if you're doing it. If not, re-look at those descriptors for sure.
Love it.
And thinking beyond visuals. So this is really why images still matter. The LLMs parse text first, yes, but they also look at images. So you need to include sizing guides, materials, use cases, benefits in plain language. Reviews are a big part of that. And so I've seen when I've searched things on an LLM, it'll come up and say, users say this runs true to size. Users say this runs big. They are looking through the reviews and giving you that insight, right? So it's super important to have that up to date. Keep the data clean, structured metadata like category tags, SKUs, schema markups, ISBN numbers. All of that is incredibly important. It helps the LLMs understand and recommend your products correctly. You'd be surprised at how many people. I was working with a really technical machinery company, and people are searching for SKUs. People are searching for really unique numbers, because if you're an expert in that field, or maybe you have a shirt that you really love and you just can see the tag and you scan the tag and put it into ChatGPT, right? You'll be surprised at how technical people are searching, even when it comes to basic things like retail, right? I talked about reviews before, but focusing on trust signals. This is ratings, it's reviews, transparent policies. That's often surfaced by AI agents when recommending products, your shipping windows. All of that information is aggregated and is important trust signals that you're giving, and that AI can aggregate and say, people said this ships really fast. This got a 5-star rating on whatever. So really important to include those. And you can use third parties for that for sure. But as long as it's readable and digestible on your website, that's very important. So like I said, the brands that will win in this new landscape will be the ones that are designing their e-commerce presence and flow, not just for human shoppers, but for the AI agents that might in the future be acting on their behalf. But I just want to reiterate, this isn't entirely new best practices. These are also best practices for SEO and for feeds and for other things you might have been doing on your site. But it's a great reminder that if you haven't looked at that in a while, it's very important to clean that up now while agents are starting to observe your site.
That was so much great information and really great things to learn. I'll be, really interested to see how brands adapt to this and the steps that they'll choose to take to get more visibility in these AI overviews and recommendations. So my key takeaways at the movement of this are that traditional search is already being supplemented and in some cases replaced by AI responses for some users. So your goal as a business owner or a marketer should be to get recognized by LLMs as well as by Google Bing and even social media searches, right? I feel like 2 years ago, it was really new for all of us to understand that, younger users specifically are searching in TikTok, they're searching in Instagram,
YouTube.
So the landscape's just totally changed. Now we're adding on AEO and GEO. So this space, it's still early. So best practices for AEO, GEO, and SEO are evolving, and no one has a definitive playbook yet. It's important to understand that. That means you should experiment, measure, and double down on what you see is actually moving the needle for what you are trying to do in your business. Right now, practical steps that make sense today are pretty similar to good SEO, which Katie is really driven home in this, and that creating high quality, answer focused content is what's important. You want to make sure your product page and metadata is clear, and that it surfaces the kinds of sources that LLMs cite. Content that answers top user questions is really where you need to focus. If you can, ideally with a step-by-step guide, that can help a lot. Those types of things on your website can help. Be a little skeptical at the moment of anyone that's claiming a single ultimate method for AEO or GEO. Instead, invest in performance-driven content for your services, products, and industry and your target audience that makes sense for them. Run small experiments and then prioritize the tactics that prove themselves. One simple final tip for your website is for your meta descriptions that we were talking about and titles. This can be just applied to not just for your website meta descriptions, but even the content you're generating everywhere is to take the point of view and try to use the approach that's being called by some digital marketers as spoiling the answer. Write whatever you're creating this content for. Write that content as concise responses to the questions users will actually type into an LLM. So your page or your content is easy to retrieve and cite by these LLMs.
I think that's a great one. And I always tell people first when they're asking, what can I do? What can I do to prepare for AEO or to show up more? Look at your FAQs. That's the most common questions. Revisit those. Work with your customer service team to get more information about what are the most frequently asked questions. FAQs is a great place that AI overviews pull from. Your About Us, your company page. Do you have a blog written by your founder or your CEO that's authoritative and specific content? These are all ways to be that authoritative voice in your industry. And that's the answers to the questions people will have and will be looking for. And we talked to Reddit earlier, but that's another forum I see a lot coming up in AI overviews.
Definitely.
And that's just because there's a lot of discussion on there about specific things, and it's a question answer format. So if you haven't already checked out how your brand's represented on Reddit, if you don't own a forum already and your marketing team or PR team wants to set that up, that's another great place to be to make sure you're the answer to a lot of questions and another source outside your own website that could get pulled into these AI overviews.
Yeah. And to get started with Reddit in a really quick, easy to ramp up way is to at least just go on and answer questions.
Totally.
Answer questions that are relevant to your brand and to a product that you're trying to promote, and just mention your brand, but be very useful and helpful in your answer. That's a really quick way to go on there and make an impact. So let's move on to some fun with Keep It or Skip It.
All right. This will be Keep It and Skip It AI Overviews edition.
Awesome.
Just talking about what we had before, we'll go into a little bit of like what we like as users and as marketers and what we're seeing useful and what we're seeing is not quite ready for prime time yet. So Google AI overviews versus ChatGPT. This is probably the two most popular. That's why I chose them in terms of people using these products. Which do you like better? And for me, there's not really like a right answer here. Google's AI overviews, I think they've gotten a ton improved. And so I really do like the structure of it. If I'm searching for something, I actually default to AI overviews. So I always see them now. And I will click through and look at the sources for sure. Sometimes they've been wrong. Sometimes the source is not what I'm looking for. But if I correct the prompt, sometimes I get it. And then ChatGPT, it's a little different for me. That is more of like, I am looking for you to like understand a concept or research and go back and forth with me on something. Whereas AI overviews on Google is a quick hit. ChatGPT is more of like a back and forth for me. So they're both useful in their own ways, and I'll use both and kind of compare. But I feel like ChatGPT, the output is more robust if you ask it to do such. And AI overviews in Google is really like a quick hit.
I totally agree. Google AI overviews, I'm loving. I would just say, like, even in the past like 2 weeks, I'm using them more than ChatGPT. They are Google and ChatGPT and OpenAI. They must be in a big battle at the moment because Google's doing pretty good. And I wonder if it's generational or not, because or maybe it's not even generational. I also use any LLM like ChatGPT for more of an assistant need for larger projects, but I still enjoy using Google search engine. It's kind of a natural practice that I've always done. So maybe that's why I like those Google AI overviews over searching for everything in ChatGPT. So I'm similar to you. I know other people
both have their use.
Yeah. So we'll keep them both.
Yes.
All right, cool. So another keep it or skip it is companies like Profound that offer AI, brand visibility, and management. Otterly.ai is another new platform partnering with SEM Rush on brand visibility and AI. And it looks like these are platforms that are providing attribution. Is that what it is?
Yeah. Attribution, ability to tell you like how you're showing on AI overviews, and also offering the ability to improve your visibility. So, I know I've had clients use SEM Rush and then opt into this AI. It's an additional cost, right? It always is going to be something new. Is going to cost you more.
Rush is expensive.
It is. Yeah. And then this is an additional cost into that, where they're claiming that they'll show you, how to better improve on AI, what keywords are coming up and all of that. So yeah, it's still very new. Right? It's a new area. So I think it's hard for me to say anyone could be an expert in something so new.
Exactly.
That's not to say don't use these tools if you find them useful, but I would definitely think they're going to get better over time.
Yeah.
And the providers themselves, like Google and like Microsoft and OpenAI, are going to start providing their own reporting as well, which is always going to be the most accurate. So I think like I have a little bit of a skip it for now. I wouldn't pay to use them, but I would experiment and use them.
Yeah, it's a skip it for the moment too, just because all the answers are not there. So to pay for a service where there is no best practice playbook at the moment, I have a little pause on that. Yeah. Although it's very important, their services. And like you said, they're in early building these platforms. So they're the ones doing the work to try and like solve this problem that I think eventually they'll get there, and maybe it will be a keep it at some point.
Yeah. And definitely an area I'm watching of like what providers are like really leading the charge here.
For sure.
Awesome. All right. The last one, this kind of goes on the heels of that a little bit, but agencies that claim to specialize in AEO and GEO optimization, right? So for years, agencies have focused on running digital ads or being experts in e-commerce optimization, and they might have their own slant. A lot of them include SEO, and Jackie running an in-house or an agency as well. But like a lot of them will have specialties, right? Oh, we have our SEO person, we have our analytics person that can come in and talk about this. Now they're having their AI person. So is it AEO or GEO specialist? And I would say I feel like there can be expertise built in this for sure. And we just went over a bunch of best practices. It's not too dissimilar from SEO.
Right.
So my like flag would be if it's someone totally new to the team that is claiming this expertise versus like, are we just upskilling our SEO team to now be experts in this? And I do think that's important. Agencies really need to, as agencies evolve, show that they're masters of a lot of tools. And AI is going to be an incredibly important one that they show competency in. So I definitely would want an agency that's competent in this. There's right now, like there are certifications you can get from Google and others in terms of like AI and computing. So I'd want to see some certifications, but I do think it's evolving, and I do think people can build expertise here.
Yeah, everything you said, yes. I agree that it's an upskilling of your SEO person, and that they should be upskilling to this and being able to speak to your team or your client about it, and integrating some of these practices for sure is how I would keep it. But, I would be careful as a business owner or a leader who is hiring an agency to just be careful as possibly not at the moment subscribing to a service that is strictly AEO or
Yes.
GEO. It could be a separate service, but beware of the cost.
Yeah.
That's fine. Maybe some agencies do have that as a totally separate cost, but be wary of what that cost is, because I believe, like Katie, that this should just really be an extension of current SEO best practices and services.
Absolutely. Yeah. I'm a keep it for like the major agencies and established agency upskilling. Skip it if someone's claiming we are an AI expert agency. We only have expertise in this.
Yeah,
Red flag.
definitely.
Awesome. Well, there will be many topics to come on this because this is an evolving space. So definitely just
For
something
sure.
to keep your interest. And I'm sure we'll talk about it in the future as well as things continue to evolve.
We're going to have to.
Yeah. Thank you for joining Bot Boundaries today. And we know there's a lot to unpack when it comes to the evolution of SEO and GEO and AEO. I hope this gave you a great start to understanding the changes taking place and how to best optimize your site or your retail site for e-commerce providers and your content for this new generation and evolution of search. But just want to reiterate, it's not a total left turn. It's not something completely scary and different. A lot of best practices in SEO also apply to this new era of AI overviews. So we'll just be taking it one step at a time.
Definitely. Well, it was so good seeing you today, Katie. Such a great job on all this information. And just a reminder, where can everyone find you?
So you can always find me on LinkedIn under Katie Wilson. Serious Moonlight Consulting is my company name, and also on Instagram at Serious Moonlight Consulting. How about you, Jackie?
Yeah, you can find me on LinkedIn at Jackie Gutierrez and on Instagram and TikTok at Business Growth Gal. And you can follow Bot Boundaries at Bot Boundaries on Instagram, TikTok, and YouTube. And thanks for listening as always. Make sure to subscribe wherever you get your podcasts. We're available on all platforms and also YouTube. Good seeing you.
Good seeing you. Bye,
Bye.
everyone.